So we all are beginning to think that the future of the world is intelligent. How many of us agree with that? Well, I'll say this about 80%. Let's say another 10% are shy and 10% believe that it's not going to be so. But 80% believe that it's intelligent. Over the course of our lives and maybe our parents' life over the last 60, 70, 80 years, every 10, 15 years there is a technology that comes which creates the next level for us as humans. Here is a little chart which talks about how from mainframes to PCs to the web to the cloud towards smartphones, and now we are in this age of generative AI. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen that AI is beginning to surpass human baselines, human capabilities. And the most recent example of that was, if you look at the bottom, which is competition level mathematics, it has been achieved by artificial intelligence in a matter of just 2 years. We concluded that with AI, it is very clear that what is easy will get automated. What is hard will become easier, and what is impossible will likely become possible. If you look at Gartner, and everyone is familiar with the hype curve from Gartner, which talks about what are the triggers of innovation. It normally takes a year or two for some innovation to catch momentum. Then there's a next phase to that, which is often called the peak of inflated expectations. How many of us think that generative AI at this time is at its peak of inflated expectations, or can it go further? It's at its peak? Okay, so as per Gartner, anything that reaches the peak then sees a dramatic fall. So it's quite likely, if you go by the trend, that over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, there's likely to be a decline, after which the best use cases emerge, after which you see real adoption that comes through. And then you have enlightenment, and then it becomes all prevalent. Now, countries don't want to be left behind, and every single government successively, year after year, fast, are coming out with national level AI strategies. It is just now a necessity. If we look at how many startups are getting funded or how many AI startups are getting created, that number continues to rise. It's interesting, it's insightful, but there is also some bit of technology which is not AI, which is also getting called AI, which is all sort of built into that number. On the back of these startups coming out, the M&A in AI companies is also increasing. So if you look at this particular chart, ignore those euphoric 21, 22 numbers, which are those charts going out of sync completely, those bars. But even if you look at 2019 and 2023 just standalone, that trend clearly is looking like it's gone up something like 3 times in a matter of just 4 years. It is no surprise that big tech is on a hunting spree, and they are actively buying out or investing companies. And if you see just these 8 or 9 companies, they're all US big tech. They have gone ahead and invested in all companies that have emerged in the $500 to $1 billion valuation range. They've gone in, and if I go one double click deeper into this and look at which are the top 12 VCs investing in AI, they all belong to the US. Not one is outside of the US. We tried to take a look at what else and how far ahead is the US on several other things. This chart is very, very telling. So if you look at the investment that is going into AI from the US, it is somewhere between 5 to 6 times more than what's going in Europe and the UK put together, and it is about 9 times more than what's going into China. But this does not mean that all of the wisdom, all of the knowledge that is getting created around AI is in the US as well. If you look at just the patents that are getting granted around the world, the story is very different. China is the one that is actually getting the most AI patents around the world. And if you look at just the numbers, United States is about, or rather China is 3 times higher than the US. And if you look at Europe, I wonder what is it that Europe needs to do to spur R&D. I mean, look at where Europe and the UK put together are in terms of the patents that they're getting. So the talent here, I don't know, is it flying off from here? Is it not nurtured here? Is it not skilled here? There's something that these charts say. I'm going to go deeper now to start calling out some problems. And I'm making a statement that AI has a data problem. And I know Carmela is saying, yes, indeed, I agree. Models are going to run out of data. Language level data is going to run out by the end of this year already. There is no more new language data that can go into the models that have already come out, you know, your OpenAI and all of such. If you look at image data, that is expected to take another 15 years before it runs out. But that's because all of us are taking about 100 photos here every day, and you know they're all sort of floating around somewhere in the tech ecosystem. Now, if language data is going to run out, more and more companies are starting to ingest synthetic data, which is to say, let me use existing data and replicate it in its same shape and form into a larger data set. That is going to become catastrophic for us as humans. So as data runs out, AI risks creating its own reality. You'd be surprised to see the numbers on the left side here, where if you look at synthetic news, there is a 57% increase in articles that all of us are reading in just the last 18 months that have not been written by humans. If you look at misinformation websites, there is a 500% growth in articles and news stories that are written in it, all written by AI. And if you look at data for all AI, there's a 60% chance, 60% of all data that is going to be used by AI is going to be synthetic. This is going to create what is called a model collapse. So if you see on this side, the first column is original data, first-time data. The second column is with some synthetic data, which means there is some noise in that data that by design, we as humans are injecting into it by creating synthetic data. And as time goes by, that entire image becomes very blurry. You don't really know what was true and what was wrong, what was original and what wasn't. What this is doing is making all of us realize that AI and data for AI, the quality of that data is more important than the quantity of the data. And there's a very nice podcast which you should all listen to, I recommend, which is an image that I've taken here, which is saying that Wikipedia has suddenly become a very critical source of original, authentic, and authenticated data, and the traffic that is going to them has just gone up. So, which means that you will definitely see more and more shift towards quality data. There is a very interesting project that has started about 4 or 5 years ago. It's called the Data Nutrition Project. So this is a community-led project where they are trying to say that if we have to develop something called nutrition labels, just like for food, for data as well, which means that we should be able to see this particular data set is good for what sort of risks does it contain, who is it meant for, and what you should expect from its results. It's a fantastic idea, a fantastic project, but they're struggling to get funding. So if anybody here is interested in working with them, I don't know them, but you're very welcome to go and knock out. So while we acknowledge at this stage that the world, or rather AI, has a data problem. I think AI also has a labor problem. And while we can all say that, or agree and accept that for AI, clearly when you look at computers, processing power, data, speed, memory, access, or cost, the computers are going to win. LinkedIn ratified this independently, where they said that they expect nearly 50% of all of their billion users that are there on the platform to be disrupted by in their skills by AI. Citigroup published a very nice report, I don't agree with it at all, where they invented this term very recently, just 3 weeks ago, called durable human skills, which is what are skills that we as humans will still continue to be better at than machines or than artificial intelligence. And they have sort of divided them into hand, head, and heart. Now, if we are talking about labor, if we are talking about talent, there is a major fight on in the world for AI talent. And this is a beautiful chart which actually looks at where does top talent for AI research emerge in the world, which is the leftmost column here. Nearly 45–50% of it actually originates in China. And now if you correlate it back to China having the most patents, it begins to make sense. But if you see to the right, only about half of that talent stays in China, right up to their post-grad. The other half actually moves off mostly to the US and otherwise to some other companies as well. And then, we have, for example, Carmela sitting here. The Bundesbank, as an example, is also competing for the same AI talent, which is very scarce right now in the world anyways. So they are now dipping into the same talent pool, and there is a new competitor that has emerged, all on the back of there being no improvement in budgets that global organizations are allocating towards upskilling humans. So if you look at the data here, 340, 350 billion annually spent on upskilling, and it has not increased over the last 10 years or so. So it's very clear that upskilling is set to become a very important initiative and investment that all organizations, public or otherwise, will need to do over the next 10, 15 years to create that flow of talent. Another problem from a policy perspective on labor is this, which is this is IMF making a warning very recently. They're talking about that there will be need for much more unemployment insurance. There will be need for lifelong learning. So people like me in the audience who are on the older age group side, there has to be a way for us to upgrade ourselves continuously. Otherwise, we will have some sort of a problem. In the last few weeks, another new problem for policymakers and employers is emerging. There's a movement started by 13 very famous AI names called Right to Warn. And what they want to do is, they say that if I'm working in OpenAI, as an example, and I learn that there are some conversations, people are saying, oh, forget it, it's okay, put it. And I want to actually talk about it. Currently, my employment contract does not allow me to reveal anything like this. But I want to be able to say it, so I want immunity. And they are talking about the need to create something called Right to Warn, and they have listed these 4 things that they want to get immunity from. It's a major challenge. I mean, imagine if this was medicine, and there was something wrong with that medicine, somebody in the company knew it, but was not permitted to speak about it. AI is just like medicine. It needs to be cared for exactly in that way. So we've done the data problem, we've done the labor problem. AI also has a trust problem. I think there are many people who are going to kill me now saying, what is this? There are only problems and problems and problems that you're talking about, but I'm going to talk about a lot more. If you look at this particular analysis from Stanford, and we have David here, so David, you have to agree with it. There's only about 3% of people who have shown that they highly trust the accuracy and the output that's coming out from data. The largest chunk of people who say they somewhat trust, which is the most positive of these 5 bars, other than highly trust, is only about 40%. But if you say somewhat trust, that means you don't really trust. If it was a life impacting decision, it looks like there is really no trust in what comes out of AI, at least by this chart. We've all seen deep fakes and all of these things, and it is quite clear that not too long from now, all content will be considered fake until otherwise certified. Today, all content we see is considered true until we begin to slowly doubt it, and which is the phase we are in right now. But certification of all data being true or not is going to become essential in the next few months, not even like 3-4 years. AI also, we all know, has a power problem, has an energy problem, right? So if you, and after I saw this data, I have changed personally. So if I do a Google search, it costs the environment 10 times lesser in carbon emissions than if I do a ChatGPT query. And how easily and freely we all do ChatGPT queries, but every time we do one, it causes 10 times more burden on the grid. Now, it is already forecasted that we and our planet needs something like energy equivalent of what Japan uses in a year, extra in just the next 3 years. And that is a big problem. And why is that happening? Because models are ingesting more and more data. GPUs are needing great power to run and produce what they've been built to do. And if you look at the time, the cost that it is to build a model, down from $930, the first bar here on this side, for the first transformer in 2017, as recent as 2017, cost just $930. And then GPUs emerged. And then all of that started to happen. And now it's costing $200-300. So in the US, if you look at just power and electricity consumption, the blue line here is the energy consumption without AI, and the red one is if we use AI. This next chart also has made me change. If you look at that green box there on the lower end of the 25x, that is just a text query. But if you are using DALL-E or Midjourney or Sora or Kling to generate an image, your carbon footprint is 25 times higher than just that. So don't just sit and play around with it because it's costing us too much. AI also has a capital allocation problem. When I was making this, I was very worried. I said, shit, what are you saying? Everything is a problem and a problem, but it is. But we'll get positive soon. Okay, but let's start with a positive side of the problem. Globally, there has been an improvement in the downward trend of the money that's going into investments. So it is clearly now trending back up in the space of AI. But as capital is getting invested in AI companies, there is a new fear that is emerging, which is that where's the revenue? When VCs put money in, just in the last 12 months, there has been a 99.5% drop in prices for GPT-3, GPT 3.5 level intelligence. And that is a big problem for a VC who's looking for monetizing of whatever you're creating. With the use of all this power and infrastructure that's required, there is money that is beginning to go now towards capital-hungry infrastructure. Because if there are no power plants, if there is not enough electricity, what do? You have to go and build it. And building it, meaning if you see the top bar there, 22 is the yellow and 23 is the blue bar. And you can see what a dramatic shift it has been towards AI infrastructure and a little bit on AI governance. We tried to validate this with some other data points. So just this time last year, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA said that the world needs about $1 trillion to be spent in upgrading data centers. Now, that's just one side of it. But even if you upgrade them, where is the power to run them? We tried to look at how much money is there in cash and cash equivalents with the big tech companies. So there's only about 350 billion with these four guys. So where is the rest going to come from? Now, big tech are clearly looking for ROI on their investments, and they are looking for us to foot the bill. And so let's take an example here. So if you look at Microsoft, in November 22, December 22, they suddenly invested $10 billion in OpenAI. Now, that's fine. When OpenAI wants to run all the GPUs, what do they need? They need power. Now, if there is no power, what is OpenAI going to do, or what the world is going to do? They are going to build power generating capability. So now you can see a very strategic shift happening in the big tech companies figuring this out and saying, okay, I've got cash, I'm going to go and build my own power plant. So over the last 2-3 weeks, you would have heard and read a lot on this, that it's suddenly growing. Now, if they are going to build it, a power plant is a long gestation period business. How will they generate the ROI? How will they explain that to their shareholders? It's going to come from somewhere, and that's all of us. It's going to come from us as subscribers. So that is how OpenAI, which was started as open, became closed, which was started as free, came at $20 a month, and everyone else is following it. Here is Mr. Gates, just 2 weeks ago, laying the foundation of what he calls the most advanced nuclear facility in the world, because we as humans have invented a new type of nuclear energy which does not generate nuclear wastewater, and this is it. But this itself is still going to take about 5 years to get built. It's not a surprise then that there is a shift. It seems like, maybe it's anecdotal right now because the data point is just 1 year, but most of the large seekers of capital are getting the money. And if you look at the number of deals that are happening, even in the 50 to 100 million or less than 50 million category, are dropping. Because the backing for this is that if you are big, you're worth it. If you're mid-tier or small, maybe you're not. AI also has a policy problem. So the AI is saying, what? That was my panel, right? Yeah, I know. So, we are in an industrial era policy set, but we are trying to operate in a digital era. And Carmela, this has nothing to do with you, okay? But policymakers, and you will like me for this, have the toughest job in the world today, right? If you look at all these boxes, each one of them is a nightmare. How do you deal with just one of them? Forget having to deal with all of them at one time. It is very, very, very difficult. So policymakers, I'm beginning to think, are damned either ways, right? Whether they go slow or they go fast. So they have to decide whether they want to slow down and worry or speed up and worry. But either ways, you will have to worry. The other challenge that's coming out of this is there is divergence of some sort at region and country levels on what they want to do with their policy making around artificial intelligence. And the US is remaining very pro-innovation. EU has gone ahead, way ahead of the rest of the world. I remember the French president, sometime in March saying, we have now started to regulate things that haven't been invented yet. CB Insights, the CEO there, said, Europe now has more AI regulations than they have AI startups. But if you look at it from a VC or an entrepreneur's perspective, it's quite possible that if you have greater policy clarity, at least you know that you're investing your money in the right place, and 3-4 years later, somebody's not going to come and say this is not permitted anymore. So there is a positive lining to it, but most countries, if you look, are all taking a very pro-innovation approach. They are not rushing to begin to regulate this. The EU has now got an AI office, and they have set up these 5 units, trust and safety, innovation, etc. And they are all looking at, so this model will get replicated around the world, but in its word, I don't know, in its spirit, I think yes. Many policymakers, governments have made bold statements. So when the Bletchley Park AI Summit happened in November 22 in the UK, Rishi Sunak very boldly said, we are going to be able to test the safety of most leading AI models before they are released. Nothing of that has happened yet. And many AI models have been released. Policymakers are rightly worried about the concentration of all of these big models into the hands of a few. OpenAI started as open, went closed. So regulators and policymakers at the start of OpenAI are thinking these are good guys. But 6-8 months later, suddenly they become bad guys. Oh shit, you closed it. So there's a very useful, and maybe you want to take a picture of this as well, PhD research paper that said, how do you decode intentions of people and companies in the space of artificial intelligence? It's a 60, 70-page document. I've read it 3-4 times. Very, I mean, I still have to read it again to absorb it. But the strongest sign yet of how regulatory scrutiny is starting to be a little bold was what happened in the US 2 weeks ago, where 3 different agencies of the government, because the US doesn't have an AI agency, so 3 different CFTC, Fed, and one other have now gone in to do this sort of thing. I'm going to skip this one. So let's try and summarize. We have broadly concluded that it is fair to say that the US has the capital. It is also broadly fair to say that it seems that China has the patents. It is also broadly fair to say that it is EU who has the rules, right? It is also fair to say that policymakers are also in the market now for talent. So it's clear, EU has set up the office, UAE has set up 22 AI officers within the government itself, and they will hire their teams. And our planet has a AI-led energy problem. So is AI even adding value? What the hell are we even doing if there's, so much wrong with it? So how many of us think that AI is adding value at this point? Wow, okay, nearly everybody. Okay. So yes, it is. It is adding value right now in market caps of the big tech companies, but not in any other way. So in just the last 10 months, the 12 trillion that has been added to the 44 trillion of the S&P 500 market cap now has been in just 10 months, of which about half of it is just chip companies. So there's a very high concentration with NVIDIA and ARM and Intel, all of these companies making real good hay while it's cloudy, it's not sunny. But there are some early shoots of positive news. Klarna, many people say they are saying this because they are soon IPOing, are making statements that they figured out how AI works, and they've saved $10 million because they don't make enough, they don't rent images anymore, they just make them. I started to think if you're making images, that means it's more expensive to the carbon side of the world. And a recent study said that only 1 in 6 to 7 or 1 in 7 to 8 companies is actually seeing revenue and growth out of it, or seeing service efficiency, or seeing OpEx cost reduction. I think these are very okay numbers. I don't think that we should be worried about it. But there is some dramatic increase in what people thought were going to be costs of implementing AI. Only 3% of them last year thought it was going to be a problem. As the year went by, just last month when the same survey was done, 43% of them are saying the implementation costs of AI are a concern. They also said response accuracy, 7% thought that it was an issue. Now nearly 36% of them are saying this. So at this time, at least I concluded that it is only fair to say that these are but growing pains. right? We shouldn't write this off. We shouldn't welcome it. But we should uh, all conclude that the future of the world, and thankfully I'm in agreement with all the hands that went up, is indeed intelligent. And with that background and that overshoot of 7, 8 minutes, let's get started.